Welcome to Evidence and Instinct, where women practitioners explore women's health through the lens of Eastern medicine and evidence-based insight. Grab a cup of tea or head out for your walk and join us for a thoughtful discussion grounded in evidence and instinct. All right, who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Set the tone. So I'm Eartha Armstrong. I'm a licensed acupuncturist, clinical herbalist, and a board-certified fertility specialist. I'm also the founder of Mulberry Acupuncture and Wellness, a busy little clinic in downtown Longmont, Colorado. My work very much focuses on helping women with hormonal transitions in life. So that looks like cycle regulation, supporting fertility, helping women move through menopause and perimenopause with support and with ease, hopefully. And so with that, I feel like the biggest thing that lights me up and is why I do this work is that I get to help people realize how their bodies work and what's important with their health and how to interact with the medical system versus our system and all of that. So many of the clients that come in to see me come in discouraged and dismissed and feel like they don't really have a grasp on what's going on in their bodies. And so I feel like my role is to slow things down and ask them better questions and connect the dots and really make a plan that feels like it is supportive and very much with ease that can be accomplished in their busy lives. And so that's what I focus on a lot in my practice. And then I came to this medicine through my own healing journey. I was sick a lot when I was a kid, and I had pretty severe asthma and ended up on daily medication and to manage that. And I eventually found acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine and experienced shifts in my body that I never thought were possible, and was able to actually get off of the medication and haven't had to use any medication for many years. And so that has informed my practice as well. I really care about listening and the nuance and how things show up in people's lives, and then the clinical knowledge as well, the studying and all of that comes along with that. And then I feel like this podcast is going to be just a continuation of that. It's going to allow us to have those in-depth conversations, keep us curious, and maybe allow us to have good community and connections with other practitioners. And I feel like, it's just, I'm excited to be here and excited for this to come to fruition. So, yeah.
I'm Dr. Ann Devereaux. I am a licensed acupuncturist and clinical herbalist here at Mulberry. I began my career in 2003 working in women's health in Western medicine, and worked in that field for many years in clinical and administrative roles. When I was ready to take things up a notch and go back to school, I thought about public health. I thought about nursing. I thought about international aid. And much like Eartha, I had some personal health issues come up, and bouncing from specialist to specialist, I didn't feel like I was getting the answers that I needed. So I branched out and I tried Chinese medicine. And with acupuncture and Chinese herbs, I got the best results ever. And that was a pivotal moment for me. And I haven't looked back. I got my master's in 2012, started my private practice at that time, specializing in women's health, and pursued advanced training in sports medicine and orthopedic acupuncture at that time. I went back to school and finished my doctorate a couple of years ago, and discovered and explored a specialty in mind-body medicine through that work. And even though those specialties feel very disparate at the surface, underneath all three of those is a really fundamental drive for me to work with patients to make lasting and impactful change with complex health issues, especially when they're not getting results elsewhere. And I feel like there is so much suffering in this world, both overt suffering and covert suffering, where we suffer in all of these small ways and we just suck it up and push through, and we really don't have to. And I feel like it is my mission as a human being to help fellow human beings with that suffering, both in big ways and in little ways. And these three specialties are the way in which I feel like I can have the greatest impact. And it is so incredibly rewarding and gratifying to see folks come in with a gray cloud over them and then to walk out with a sparkle in their eyes and their head held high and they have a plan and they feel better. And that just keeps me going from one day to the next.
Absolutely agree. So good.
My name is Courtney Smith, and I am a licensed acupuncturist and board certified fertility specialist here at Mulberry Acupuncture. And I began my journey in kind of the holistic wellness world when I was looking for a path in my life. And I just kind of fell into working at a chiropractic office and managing a yoga studio. And I was looking for something. And at the time, I was also looking for alternatives to treat my own health issues. So similarly to everyone else, I sought out acupuncture, and my acupuncturist was so inspirational and really became a mentor to me. And it was the right place at the right time. And I just found the benefits of acupuncture were so profound, and herbal medicine as well. And also, I just began thinking about health in a completely different way, and how so many factors in my life were contributing to the imbalances that I was experiencing, and how that could even be my not only the obvious factors like lifestyle and diet, but also like my relationships and my attitude, my perception, just all of these factors shaping health, which was just mind-blowing at the time. And so I ended up going to acupuncture school in 2014, and yeah, it was our lab. And I think we had Anne as a TA as well. and then got my degree in acupuncture, and then ended up going back east where I'm from. I'm from Washington, D.C., and I ended up going back to join a clinic that was actually next to the chiropractor I used to work for. And at first I was supposed to be treating sports medicine, but then I got there and their acupuncturist that was treating, it was primarily a fertility clinic. And so the acupuncturist was leaving. And so all of a sudden I just fell into the fertility world, which at the time was, I don't know, it was just serendipitous. And it was not ever something I thought I would want to treat, but then I just completely fell in love with it and really bonded with my patients. And then it also helped inform me more about, women's health and about my own health. And then, so after working there for a while, I also began my own fertility journey and ended up getting pregnant and going through that whole process, which I think, kind of like so many practitioners, I think sometimes our interests follow like our life, the seasons of life we're in. So that really became a season of life for me, and then inspired me even more to treat this population and to support them and to empathize with them. And it's been that way ever since. And so I'm really just so to be able to support women on their fertility journeys, and to hold the space for them and to support them and to celebrate the wins and to be there when they're grieving, when they've lost pregnancies, or when their journeys are challenging, which they inevitably are at times. I find this work to be so meaningful because I know how important women's health is. And I think now the rest of the world does too. Thank goodness, finally. And, I really feel like it's important to empower women, to give them a voice, to encourage them to advocate for themselves. And I'm just so, like I said, honored and grateful to be able to do that.
Beautiful. All these are so inspiring. I am Lee Erickson, and I am a little bit behind the scenes as well as a part of this podcast. I've been, I guess, nominated as the host, or so to speak. So I am the editor and also, producer, the designer, kind of just, I guess, the creative role in this room. And I am also so fortunate to be a patient here, and I've been treated by each one of these lovely women. And I'm just so incredibly grateful to have them as a resource in my own health. And one thing that just stuck out in particular was my first pregnancy and postpartum recovery. I was so fortunate to just have Eartha at my side and my aide to help me recover and just completely what feels like dodge any sort of postpartum, severe side effects or depression or, any sort of health issues that come along with the wild roller coaster of hormones in even prenatal, but most importantly, postpartum. And, I was just treated so well. And from that moment on, I've just been so hooked on acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And I will always go to that first as a resource before searching elsewhere for any other health guidance you could say, I guess. I'm a true, I'm not even going to say believer because that's not the right word, but I am like living proof of how Chinese medicine and acupuncture can severely improve your life and maintain a stable, healthy, well-rounded, balanced life, especially as a woman. Yeah, going through that process. And if we end up doing video, you can see I'm very clearly pregnant right now. So I'm also going through the same experience as we speak. And again, I'm so fortunate to have these amazing women as a resource for my own health. And just again, honored to be here and so excited to see where this podcast goes, because I think, as we've all discussed before, women's health is such a wild topic that seems a bit under researched, and just needs so much more attention that it's gotten in the last, couple of decades. But fortunately, we're coming into a better world where I think more and more people are becoming aware of how complex and beautiful and wild our bodies are. So looking forward to seeing where this podcast takes us.
I just wanted to add a little bit to that. I feel like one of the big strengths of this podcast is, when you look at any skill or profession on the surface, you think, oh, I could do that, right? Like you're just sticking needles in whatever, like anybody could do that. And I think anybody who's expert in their field knows it's super simple to perform their tasks, but it's incredibly difficult to do it well. You think about electricians. Oh, I can connect cables, whatever, some glue and pipe. And like, it's easy to do that, but it's really hard to do that well. Anybody who's DIY'd a house project realizes that it's a lot harder than it appears on the surface. And the same goes for acupuncture and Chinese medicine. I think in media or pop culture, it's really easy to see, oh, somebody just throws a bunch of needles in you and you feel better, whatever. Or it's this big elaborate placebo. And my hope with this podcast is that you understand, that the audience gets to understand a little bit more about what goes on behind the scenes, because there is so much depth and breadth to this medicine. It's so old and has gone through and evolved at a level that no other medicine that we are aware of has done. And so it is incredibly sophisticated. It is incredibly elegant. And so it can outwardly appear so simple, but there's so much that goes behind it, right? Like you see an expert and they make it look easy. And it's because there is so much that goes in behind the scenes. And my hope with this podcast is that the audience can get a sense of what goes on behind the scenes that leads to just those few moments with the needles, because there's so much more to it.
And I think adding to that, there's an intention that we've like talked about ahead of time, that I think this podcast is also, there's so much bad information out there, and there's so much marketing out there, and there's so much like ideas about what health should look like and what women's health should look like and how we should be thinking about our bodies and how we should be, you know, treating it like a machine, or, you know, however, you know, our culture is very, you know, separated from the emotional part of our bodies. And I feel like, you know, our discussions have the ability to really dive into that and bring that Eastern medicine philosophy into it, but also bring light to like some of the junk out there and some of the good stuff. Like, you know, there has been a big evolution in the last couple of years, you know, that has started to recognize that we're not just little men, we're not machines, we don't just need our oil changed. It's like we're these dynamic people, and working within those systems, I think, is really an important discussion to have.
I appreciate you mentioning that, because I feel like in this age of the internet and AI, and there's a never-ending pool of information and stuff out there, but the ability to discern what is legitimate and what is not is harder and harder the larger the volume becomes. And I feel like with AI, that's like this exponential growth of information. And it can sound correct, but it may not be factually correct. And so I appreciate you making that point, because this is all about, you know, just because you watch something on YouTube or ChatGPT tells you something and it sounds right, doesn't mean that, one, it's either factually correct, even though it sounds good, and two, whether that's actually applicable to you as an individual. The internet is not the same as a skilled licensed practitioner sitting in a room looking at you and looking at your chart and talking about your health history. And that individualization and that specialization is so incredibly important, especially in any field of medicine, but I feel like also in the health and wellness world, because there's a lot of stuff out there that sounds good, but is not actually good. You scratch the surface and it's a scam, or it's just BS, for lack of a better word. And it's just helping people part with their money. And I think being able to empower people to understand what's legit versus not is so important.
Yeah, and I think that it's so important, especially I think with how often women have been gaslit in the medical world, the Western medical community, that, right, like it's important to trust yourself and how you feel. And a lot of women go and, for example, they're on birth control and, you know, they've gained 50 pounds and they are like emotional wrecks, and they have their, you know, primary care physician or their OB saying to them, well, there's not nearly enough hormones in that IUD to cause any of those problems. And like that's, I just think it's just completely gaslighting and shutting down. I don't know. I just feel like that leads to so much distrust, so much apathy. Just, I don't know. I feel like suffering and unneeded suffering. And this is a place that where women can go and we can look at them and we can see what's going on, but also not separate from the individual. We're looking at the whole picture. And I think sometimes Western medicine tries to be so objective that it like separates the person from the condition. And that's the opposite of what we do here. And also we're here to believe the patient, to validate them, and to find out what the root really is, because there is a root somewhere.
Yeah, that gaslighting is huge. It's like the medical equivalent of like, suck it up, buttercup. And that is so invalidating for women. And there's such a long history of that socially, culturally, and medically, where women's concerns are just dismissed. Oh, women can endure pain. Oh, yeah, they're built for it. No, actually, that's just medical misogyny, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it is.
disturbing.
It's also interesting you mentioned the word trust, and it's like we are in such an incredible time. I don't know if that's the right word, but like interesting time right now in just like the medical world at large of like just trusting healthcare in general. Like there's so many reasons why specifically Americans have so many reasons not to trust healthcare. So it's like I see this time as like this beautiful, era of like even like Anne mentioned, Chinese medicine has been on and around for what, thousands of years, maybe more. Yeah. But it's like I feel like this is such a beautiful time for this to really, rise to the surface again. And like people are like hungry for alternatives to Western medicine. Yeah, our medical system in general. So it's like this is such a great time to kind of really bring these topics to the surface and dive deeper into like why we're so hungry for, yeah, these beautiful, and it's like, again, alternative doesn't even seem right because it's not even like, oh, it's this alternative out there thing because it's been around forever and it's worked, So it's just, I'm so happy to like be a part of this movement of bringing it to the surface. And there's probably so many humans out there, again, specifically in America, that have never once ever had an acupuncture treatment, or, even honestly, before I met you, like I never had acupuncture, and it just was like beautifully brought into my life, and I'm so grateful. But it's wild how many people don't utilize it as a resource. So
Yeah, well, I think in the medical world, it's, everything's always changing, which is interesting and exciting, and research is important. But I think that, the Chinese medicine, right, it basically stays the same, right? The theory doesn't change in a way, if that makes sense. It's not that we don't learn more and that we don't also utilize Western medicine. I think that things are always fluctuating in the medical world, but like someone can come here and not have gotten an answer by doctors, or maybe gotten a diagnosis, but still have no answer as to how to treat it, or been told like, that's just going to be how it is. Like there's really no treatment for it. But when you come to an acupuncturist, we can explain pretty much anything through the lens of Chinese medicine. And so at the very least, that person has a diagnosis through us, and then also a treatment plan through us, including acupuncture and maybe herbal medicine. But I think that, we're able to treat everyone, where I don't know if Western medicine is always able to necessarily treat everyone.
Yeah. And I feel like that there's strengths and weaknesses to everything, right? Like, and I don't see it in either or situation either. That's one of the things that I think is really powerful about this podcast, is that it's not an either or. It's not like you have to pick a team. That especially with a lot of the most recent scientific evidence that's come out, and I like, this is just a hypothesis of mine that's not based on anything but a guess, but when I finished my master's in 2012, there really wasn't a whole ton of scientific published research on acupuncture. There's a little bit here and there, whatever, on pain and electrical stimulation and so on and so forth. And
Needling.
Acupuncture, which is
so weird.
That's a podcast into itself. But basically, yeah, like poorly designed clinical research that said acupuncture was no more effective than the placebo. And it was like, well, actually, if you designed your research properly, you'd get more accurate results. Anyway, the more recent research, which my hypothesis is that it's emerged in the wake of the opioid crisis, when there actually was a stronger push and funding available to pursue non-pharmaceutical, non-surgical interventions for
Ted Kipchuk.
Oh, Ted Kipchuk. Has done so much.
Pushed that through big time, just to give
absolutely
shout out.
Ted Kipchuk is brilliant. Exactly. And so there has been this growing body of scientific evidence demonstrating the efficacy and safety of Chinese medicine and acupuncture in the treatment of so many different conditions, that it's not just pain, it's not just this, it's not just that, that it's growing, it's blossoming in so many ways. But that doesn't dismiss or negate the history of Chinese medicine that has existed and persists regardless of the evidence, right? Like, it's nice to have that language. And it just seems to further bolster and support what we're doing and why we're doing it. But I also see us working in an integrative way, right? Like, we can be members of a team with other providers of other specialties and other fields. And in that way, I feel like we can have this symbiotic benefit to the patient where it's greater than the sum of its parts. It's not just seeing an acupuncturist or just seeing your primary care or just seeing your specialist. You get that whole team together and you create this beautiful harmony and chorus that winds up raising the patient's results and outcomes so much higher than they could have gotten otherwise. And so it is important to be aware of the strengths and the weaknesses in, like, the fundamental structures of the different medical philosophies, but then also see how they fit together and how they overlap and how we can fill in the gaps for each other to the betterment of the patient. And that's what I think this podcast is, the real strength of that. Like, you don't have to drink the Kool-Aid that, like, oh, chlorella for life, just like an example, like, you got to do this and nothing else or whatever.
Right.
That it's really about understanding the strengths and the benefits of scientific research, evidence-informed medicine, and also ancient tradition, and the benefits and strengths of Chinese medicine that have persisted throughout the ages, and they persisted for a reason. It works. It really works. And now we just have more data to demonstrate specifically how and why on a, neurotransmission mitochondrial level. And that's wonderful. It's nice to have new language for something that has gone on for so long.
Right. Yeah. And I love that, we have explanations in Chinese medicine for those lab results or for the, like, that's like where I like completely nerd out. It's just like, some of these lab results come back a little bit low, and I like connecting it to the medicine, looking at what the symptoms are that have that connection and that kind of stuff. It's like super fascinating. But I totally agree. I think that we see it in the fertility world, especially, I think, in a big way. There is a nice merge that's happening in those two fields. They respect that acupuncture increases their fertility rates by as much as 25%, which is huge. And so they rely on acupuncturists to make that happen. So it's like, yeah, and being honored in that way by those doctors in their way. It's not 100% in their, whatever, but I think that there is a transition that's happening. Acupuncture is the number one recommendation for low back pain to start, like there's a recognition that's coming from that side. And I love that there is this respect for what we're doing. And I do often, rely on that for blood testing, for imaging, for, like it's hard to just be putting needles in people and not being able to see what's going on or, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a melding that is happening. That's beautiful. And yeah, honoring that is important.
So I was just going to ask, like, currently when you're able to kind of receive the information from a patient's like medical, lab results, for example, that's on the patient to do, right? Is there any sort of system in place where you're able to, like, and again, this might be like HIPAA sensitive, but like communicate with a patient's doctor? So you do have kind of a that's something that exists right now already?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
and we do
cool.
that on occasion. We're also in Colorado. We're lucky. We're able to run labs and order that kind of stuff for clients too.
Oh, cool.
I
I
wish
didn't
it
realize
happened
that.
more.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say I didn't realize that
Yeah.
because it does seem like like you said, it's just like a holistic way of looking at like the whole picture instead of just like these isolated, different treatments or whatever you want to call them. Because that it's so important to look at the big picture instead of just like focusing on one thing. So that's really interesting. I didn't realize that. I thought it was like, you guys are all just on your own and like you kind of hear from your patient what their medical reports are. So that's good to know.
That's the most common is the patient is kind of the messenger. But, if any physicians or other practitioners are listening to the podcast, we are wide open and love collaborating on a practitioner to practitioner basis because I feel like that improves the outcomes for patients and they don't feel like they have to be the one couriering messages back and forth and worrying if they're using the right words or not. We can collaborate directly with practitioners, and we're all well versed in doing that and are super open to it. Not all physicians that I've worked with are necessarily reciprocating that same interest, but if there are practitioners out there who are, we're wide open and absolutely love that level of collaboration because I feel like it fosters mutual respect for each other's disciplines, us to learn more about what the other provider is doing, and then they can learn about what we're doing, and we can dovetail things really easily so that we're not either replicating things, duplicating things, or creating gaps in care that we don't realize. So yeah, if there are practitioners out there who are listening, we'd love to collaborate.
Awesome. I'm just in my
Doctors tend to be super busy these days.
Yeah.
I feel so bad for them. Like it's they're
that makes
they're
sense.
struggling hardcore. It's
Yeah.
the amount of time that they have to actually follow up about something is
I'm just
probably
thinking
not realistic.
my I don't
just
know.
to give them some credit.
My left brain is just thinking like how amazing it would be sometime down the road in the future to
Have that collaboration.
for the patient's sake, like how my chart is kind of a medical, right? Like dashboard of communication. And I don't know if that's like nationwide. Yeah, I guess it might be. It's not just specifically here in Colorado, but yeah, just like being able, if you guys all could be like collaborators on their, whatever dashboard you could say of their entire like medical field outlook, I guess that would be just like such a, like, that's like the future that I'm like looking forward to. It's like,
moves.
again, just not, I mean, even though I'm so glad that I didn't realize that you guys are in communication with the medical doctors and everything, but even just like really overarching, like thinking like as one almost, and not just these like separate, and insurance covering it more.
Well,
Don't even get me started on
that's
that.
another podcast.
Yeah,
like
another.
with my chart, if we were in that health system, right? Like certain hospitals use different, like Epic or whatever, use different software platforms. And so as long as you're on that software platform, you can typically, if you're in that network, as it were, can access that chart. And so it's all in-house. And so for hospitals and medical systems that have acupuncturists on board, they get that benefit.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. I see. What inspired each of you to come together to create this podcast in the first place?
So over the summer, we met for our bi-monthly meetings, and we came together collaboratively, and every meeting would kind of end up in this long discussion about this thing that was in the news or this podcast or this, product or whatever. And it was it felt very in depth. And if somebody was listening to us, it would be interesting. Was kind of like the seed. And it felt very natural and easy to have these kind of cool conversations, bringing them back to Chinese medicine and also being aware of what the most recent research is saying and, our clinical experience and all of that. And so that was the little like inkling that started to happen. And then one day Courtney and I were in the office having our meeting, and we were talking through like what's next for where we're going with things, and we love being in the clinic, but we also feel like there's this like hunger to be a little bit more thinking about not just like how we're interacting with the patient in front of us, but getting our information out a little bit more. It feels like we repeat ourselves a lot, and we like kind of are on this loop with people of like, always kind of saying the same thing over and over again. And so like, it feels important to get the message out a little bit. And then not that long after Courtney and I think it was a week later, after Courtney and I were like talking about maybe we should start a podcast, and so that we have this platform to like start talking about these things. Anne came to me and she's like, I've got this great idea.
That's awesome.
She's like, I feel like I want to be able to like talk to, a group of people about this information, but if we have people in the room with us, it's going to turn into a session. And so I think maybe a podcast would be a good idea. And I was like, oh my gosh, this has got to happen, because I just had the same conversation basically with both of them without like either pulling information out of either of them. And so, yeah, it feels like there's some energy behind it, and we're excited to get this started.
Serendipitous.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Is there a particular gap or conversation you feel is missing in the women's health space that you hope this podcast will help fill?
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. I think each of us has spoken to it to a small extent so far. I really like what you were saying, Courtney, about the gaslighting that happens with women in medicine, where women are not either heard or taken seriously, or their concerns are dismissed. There's so much about women's reproductive medicine in particular, but women's health in general. I mean, we see that with like cardiac health, right? Classic example where we all learned what the signs of a heart attack were for a man. And women's cardiac issues present totally differently, and somehow that does not get the same airplay. So that's one example. But to dive in specifically with women's health, there's so many patients I work with who just assume that they should be grumpy, moody, and suffer for a week before their periods, that their periods need to be, or not need to be, but that they're normal when they're painful, heavy, and interrupt their daily life and compromise their quality of life. That's just suffering that women are expected to endure, and that's just part of what comes with this body. And same with perimenopause and menopause, right? Like, oh yeah, you're just gonna suffer, you're not gonna be sexy anymore, you're gonna gain a bunch of weight,
sleeping is not an option.
Yeah, you're just gonna like be hot and uncomfortable and grumpy, and like everyone around you is gonna suffer because you're suffering. And it's like, that's BS. That's not the way it needs to be. And the fact that that is so normalized in our society and our culture, and I think that goes back to a lot of sexism. We could dive into all the things, but that's really what's going on. And we see that inequality in medicine. And thankfully, the tide is turning a little bit, but it needs to turn a lot more. And it really should have started a long time ago. But we are where we are. And so I feel like this podcast is a great opportunity to bust a bunch of myths and to dive into taboos around women's health and healthcare in general that typically go unspoken or just assumed as normal, that are very much not normal. And that there are solutions out there. Women don't need to suffer unnecessarily, and they don't need to just suck it up. This is part of being a woman, because that's BS.
100%. Oh, there's so many. My brain is just churning with so many things to add to that, but maybe we should just save it for a whole other, like, hormones alone. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's just
there's just so
sea
much
of,
marketing and so much. Yeah.
It's
It's
wild.
just a lot to cut through. And so hopefully, I think what we've talked about with the intention is to just, be able to cut through a lot of the noise and bring it back to traditional medicine a bit and bring it back to what we know about the evidence of what's going on. And yeah.
And instinct.
Oh yeah. That's the traditional
Don't forget-
part,
yes, right.
It's like relying
Yeah.
on actually recognizing what's going on in our
Yeah.
bodies and trusting that, I feel
Totally.
like that is instinct. We've got a lot of
Yeah.
knowledge if we actually are allowed to pay attention to it and honor it,
Mhm.
and so
Yeah. And I was thinking that earlier too, like Anne mentioned, a lot of people kind of turning to ChatGPT or you or the internet in general for health advice, which, to each your own, but you're missing that human instinctual level of information, like when you're in the room with a patient, there's so much more going on than just listening to, ailments that they're having or whatever it is. So it's the human, we can't lose the human, energetic transmission that happens with it every session. It's such an important thing that you don't want to get lost in the
absolutely
wild world
Yeah.
that we're living in.
yeah
But there's also something to, like, if you have a question, instead of turning outward, to be able to turn inward, and I think that's where the instinct comes in too. That idea of interoception and like internal awareness of your mental, emotional, and physical self, and being able to connect with yourself is something that gets lost, I think, in this modern age. We've got so many distractions, so much sense input, but being able to get quiet and to really turn inward. I mean, you know your body better than anyone else. You have lived in your body your entire life. Nobody else has that experience. And being able to really sit with that and listen to the truth that it has to offer can be very empowering and also very terrifying for patients, especially if they've never done that before. To be able to tune in and to really listen to what's going on. I mean, one thing that I share with patients often, we talk about, there's certain common themes that we share with patients over and over. And one is really learning how to listen to your body, especially when it's telling you something you don't want to hear. That comes up with athletes where they're like, I've got this meet or I've got this competition or it's ski season and I want to go. And it's like, your knee is telling you not. You got to listen to that. Or vice versa, where it's like there's a lot of inhibition. It's like, oh, I shouldn't do it. Oh, I shouldn't do it. And it's like, well, what is your body saying?
Right.
Your body's ready, and same with women's health, like being able to really tune in and listen and to trust that tiny little voice in there. It's terrifying, but it is always right. And not to say that like that inner voice is going to have your diagnosis. Like that's not a substitute for receiving medical care. But being able to tune into that provides so much insight and wisdom that then informs not only the way you relate to yourself, but the way your providers can help you as well.
Yeah. And your relationships in life in general. Yeah. Which is huge.
So many people are disconnected from their bodies. They don't even know how to answer questions about how they're feeling or where they're feeling pain or what the details are of what they're experiencing. And yes, you're right. I think the more with acupuncture, it seems like patients become more aware of their bodies, just not only because of our questions that we ask them, but then I think just acupuncture itself has a way of, and maybe it's because, I'm speculating obviously, but maybe it's because it puts the brain into the same brainwave state as meditation when you're getting it, but it really just makes people be in their bodies, on a more regular basis. And then they start to notice more. And you're right, then that informs how their doctors or how we are going to help them and treat them.
How do you see that with fertility? Because I feel like that's a big part of fertility care.
Absolutely. I feel like I see that a lot with symptoms, right? Because women just have written off their symptoms for so long that even if their symptoms include, I'm just so I'm always so blown away when women tell me things like this, even when their symptoms include periods that are so painful that they're vomiting and that they're drenched in sweat, but their doctors have been telling them maybe that's normal, that they, you know, I often hear women compare their symptoms to what they think is normal for other women based on what other women have told them. So, but maybe we're all misinformed. So it's kind of just that, I guess that's how I see it often. It's just that women have either been told that their symptoms are normal and kind of the whole suck it up buttercup thing, or yeah, I just think in general in this society, we're not really taught to be in tune with our bodies. We're taught to push through. Like it's more, it's better to ignore yourself and to, work yourself to death and to, I don't know, have these habits that like are more honored by society than rest, right? Like overwork or the ability to not get any sleep and still push through the day. And I don't know, all these things are just, they work against us.
How do you each of you see your personal experiences or biases shaping the way that you approach these discussions? Kind of a tough question. I don't know.
I know I've been thinking about it like a little bit. I think for me, my bias and my focus is very much based in, I came from upbringing that used homeopathics and herbal medicine, and we ate whole foods, and like I didn't have to be on that journey that a lot of people have to be on when health starts to crash and all of a sudden you have to change all of these things in life. And so for me, I'm constantly working on bringing that back to what each client brings as their life experience and relate to it from that point of view rather than from my point of view. And so I think with this podcast as well, it's like, I think, if you grew up eating McDonald's every single day, that is a huge thing to have to overcome to be able to like eat good. And, not everybody feels good on brown rice, or not everybody feels good on, you know what I mean? And so honoring that it's a big hill to climb. And so, taking that, stepping out of my perspective and putting myself into, there's a lot of different lifestyles and a lot of different ways of thinking about things, but also the things that are supposed to be healthy don't always work with everybody's bodies. And so, you can say, have ginger tea every day, but if somebody's got, too much heat in their body, then it's not, that's not going to work. And so really like not just like assuming that everything fits into, we like glom onto these things and I think the marketing and the exposure to certain things in, the health world makes us think that, turmeric is going to fix everybody's pain or, those kind of things. And I find myself glomming onto those things from information, and then I have to pull myself back and go, okay, yeah, that's a good piece to know. And maybe that'll work for this person, but it's probably not going to work for that person. And so I think that that's the strength of Chinese medicine. And that has been like a journey for me with studying it and practicing it and getting to know it and meeting people where they're at, if it's little baby steps that need to happen in order to make transformation, then that's where I like to meet people rather than like, assuming that everybody can do this, in the way that I do it. I don't, you know what I mean? That's where I feel like I have this awareness of my bias and hope that I can keep that going through this podcast.
Gosh, that is such a healing thing for this whole, everybody in this world could learn from. Just being that extra awareness, that added layer. We all really need to, we're just kind of, you know,
honoring
like
people where, yeah.
first person shooter mode, just like going through life and kind of forget that
Absolutely.
everybody has completely different backgrounds and experiences. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
My bias, I'll just say it really quick. I kind of am extremely annoyed with Western medicine and I need to, so I'm like immediately just like, holistic, like all the way, like just forget all the rest, like none of it works. And brought a great point of like, it is the whole picture. It can have a symbiotic relationship and I should remember that.
Yeah. I mean, people with type 1 diabetes wouldn't be alive.
I know.
There's
so many things.
things that, you know, we have to honor that system, and it's a great tool. If you know how to navigate it and you have a good doctor on board that's willing to work with you, and, you know, it can be a really great tool.
Yeah,
and I feel like,
absolutely.
you know, we see miracles in the fertility world all the time. And, you know, you can't just totally dismiss,
Yeah.
you know, you can't just totally dismiss a whole department of medicine that
I'm
does
really gonna have to put my
that does have
put a filter on it.
backing to it, but also that system misses the point sometimes. And so knowing where the point is being missed and being able to
learning from
and having balance in both worlds. Sometimes we need antibiotics to get it reset, and then we add the herbs in and we get it going. The Western medicine is very powerful, and
checks and balances, I think, you know?
Yeah. And I think, you know, your sentiment is very common, and it's
Maybe
because we're dismissed and we're not actually, you know, empowered in our own healthcare when we step into that system. And so, having knowledge, and when you do step into that system, helps a lot, you know?
And there are just a lot of, like you said, it's very powerful. And so therefore there are just a lot of side effects. And so I feel like we can be very helpful, right? Of course, like you have to take antibiotics to reset yourself, but then how much is that going to trash everything else for a while? Well, then that's what we're here for. We're here to help support your digestion. We're here to help, you know, support you in whatever way we can, like as you're healing, right? Like and sometimes, force is needed, and then we can help with the rest of the process.
You haven't thought about it?
I think with bias, everybody has a bias. That's part of being human. Like you hear about that in scientific research. Part of being human is inherently having a bias. You have lived a specific life and have specific experiences and knowledge, and you can't ignore that. I think for me, it's just a matter of calling it out when it comes up and just acknowledging it. Like, okay, you asked a question. The first thing that comes to mind is my personal experience, and that is biasing my result. And it creates a blind spot, but it also creates depth of information that somebody else might have. And so I feel like just being aware and humble and acknowledging biases as they arise is really the best anyone can do. And then to play to your strengths, like anybody who's been on, you know, in a team sport environment, it's like everybody's got a strength, and play to your strengths. And then if you've got a weakness that's somebody else's strength, maybe you can learn from each other, you know, and it's just being messy and imperfect and not passing judgment, you know. I think for me, that was the big thing in medicine is like patients come in and it's like they want to tell me what they think I want to hear. Like, oh, I live on brown rice and kale. And that's not actually what I want to hear. I'm not passing judgment on your diet. I'm not passing judgment on your lifestyle.
And I would actually tell you not to do that.
I want to hear the nitty gritty. We are all messy, imperfect humans.
And don't expect that I'm doing that all the time too.
But there's like this virtue assumption working in health and medicine that's like, I feel like there's this subconscious thing that patients come in with where they're like, I need to tell them that I eat really well. I never go out. I never get junk food or sweets. I exercise 3 times a week.
I drink so much water.
No, we're not passing judgment.
You know, better than we know what's actually
going on. Absolutely. And none of us are perfect.
We're not perfect either. We are all messy and imperfect people too, and we're just helping each other along. And I feel like that's just really important when it comes to bias, is sometimes they get projected onto us and that's not real either.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What do you hope listeners will take away from each episode, or even just this podcast in general, I guess? Like, what are your hopes for the listeners?
That they're not alone.
Yeah.
And that there are answers and resources out there. And if they feel stuck or they feel ignored, that there are people out there, whether it's us or somebody we can connect them to, that really care about them doing well and that they don't need to suffer.
That they feel validated and that maybe this is interesting, that they can learn something about themselves, or maybe that they will seek out other resources to help them. And hopefully we're able to provide resources as well, which I think we will. And yeah, a lot of the same things you said.
Yeah, and I'm excited for this conversation, I'm excited for the connection. I'm excited for asking the hard questions, but encouraged to be studying and having a focus that encourages that too. I think that'll be.
Yeah, I think people are going to be really inspired by this and just empowered overall with their own health.
Absolutely.
And if they're in the area, come check us out.